What's up, everybody? Thank you for watching. Today I wanted to do a video that was inspired by the channel artv. This guy does a lot of music-based stuff, basically stuff that I try to do on my channel, where he talks about bands and albums and all this other kind of stuff. So he had a video called 7 Bands That He Outgrew, and I was like, you know what, that's a great topic that I'm totally going to steal and use for my channel. So guy from artv, if you're watching, let's do a collab. It would be a lot of fun. So I'm going to define what outgrow means for me. To me, like, if you outgrow a band, it's like the music was really simple, and that's what got you into it at the time, because for me anyway, it was like the music was really simple and catchy. But because it was so simple and catchy, it didn't really stand the test of time for me. There wasn't really anything for me to go back and rediscover about the band, because kind of who they were and what they were was kind of one-dimensional to a certain degree. Or I just realized the fact that I never really liked the band that much to begin with, and I just come to admit that in this video. You will also notice that most of these bands on my list are bands from the late 90s, because that's when my brain was still like a blank canvas, and anything that sounded cool at the time was something that I latched on to. So here we go, 7 bands I outgrew. This is Dancing with Ghosts. So yes, with Korn, I was very young and impressionable when I saw and heard the song Freak on a Leash and the music video for it off of their, I want to say, 3rd album, Follow the Leader. And it sounded like nothing else in this world. Like, I had never heard anything that sounded that rhythmical and yet that heavy. I mean, dude, when that song came out, it's like, I don't think anybody had heard anything like that, because I don't think anything like that really existed. So it blew everyone's minds, and then I got the album, and there were certain songs on there that I absolutely loved, and there were certain songs that even as a kid I was like, these songs kind of suck, but like, I'm supposed to like this band, so I'm just gonna like act like I like it. And then the album that came after that, Issues, was like just a continuation of what I already loved about the band. It was just such a new sound at the time, and it sounded futuristic. But then, like, after that album, to me, like, that's where their creativity peaked, and then it just started kind of going downhill after that. I found them getting a lot more poppy with their sound, a lot more refined. Once you get accustomed to the Korn sound and you've heard those albums, and then everything that comes after that still kind of sounds like it, but not as good, not as innovative, more of the same, but with less passion, starts getting more watered down. And then they did that dubstep album with Sonny Moore, Skrillex, or whatever, and it just jumped the shark for me at that point. And I'm just like, all right, these guys are just, they've painted themselves into a corner, because if they try to do anything too innovative at this point, they're going to lose fans, or people are just going to be like, that sucked. And if they just keep putting out the same Korn sounding stuff, it's going to be like, well, yep, sounds like Korn, the band that I've been hearing for the past 20, 30 years. So yeah, definitely grew out of Korn pretty quickly. They were one of the first bands that I outgrew.
Keeping it real, worldwide.
Up next, of course, if you're going to talk about new metal bands and growing out of them, Limbuskit's got to be right up in there in that list. I mean, can't everybody agree at this point that they've outgrown Limbuskit? I feel like that's just a given. I feel like they're a meme at this point. I feel like, you know, Break Stuff is like their classic song, but that is legitimately good. They have some legitimately great music on there, especially their like first like 2 or 3 albums. But I mean, I think the elephant in the room in this case is Fred Durst. I think everyone's just collectively over him. He represented a time in music and pop culture that is just kind of frowned upon now. Just that frat boy, like over aggressive,
creepy towards women vibes.
But I mean, with all that being said, they're still putting out new music, and when their new album came out with the song Dad Vibes on it, I mean, I thought the album was pretty good, but I gotta say, I'm just like permanently tired of like down-tuned guitars with hip-hop sensibilities. I wish that sound had died in the late 90s because I'm just so over bands. We're fusing metal and hip hop together to please everybody. Like I'm so tired of that sound. It's not even funny. So even though Limbuskit's new album wasn't that bad, it's a sound, much like with Korn, it's just a sound that I am tired of. Yeah, my next band that I outgrew would be Red Hot Chili Peppers, if I'm being completely honest with myself. I know that comes across as sacrilege to a lot of you because the Red Hot Chili Peppers are seen as one of those legendary rock acts that have stood the test of time, much like the Foo Fighters. And yes, while that is true, another part of me is like, they have 12 albums out and there's only like 20 good songs like amongst those 12 albums. Just in my opinion, I'm sorry, like that's just how I feel about it. I feel like if you buy a Red Hot Chili Peppers album, typically there's going to be 3 or 4 good songs on there, and then the rest will be either middling at best or just pure crap at worst. I told myself I really liked them as a kid, but I found myself constantly skipping certain tracks. Californication is really the only exception where I can listen to every track on the album, but that's because it was such a departure from their normal sound. They can think outside the box at times, and they definitely have on certain tracks, and those are usually my favorite tracks. But typically, if we're talking about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, they're very formulaic in their sound, in their funk, groove, kind of whatever they got going on, especially with the recent album, with the return of John Frusciante. I was so excited and looking forward to the album, and then what I got was something that was very uninspired, and that leads me to my next point. I am just done with Anthony Kiedis's fucking lyrics. Why does his lyrics have to be so fucking weird and just being weird for weird's sake? Like, and it's always been that way, but it's just with the new album, it's just gotten so blatantly obvious that what are you talking about, dude? Like, again, Californication, like he was so much more coherent lyrically, like songs like Scar Tissue and Other Side and Day Trippin', or I think that's the name of the song. Parallel Universe was kind of weird, but it was such a badass song. I was willing to look past it. But I mean, look at this is an excerpt from the song Nobody Weird Like Me off the album Mother's Milk, which I think is actually one of their better albums. The lyric is riding down the path on the back of a giraffe. Me and the giraffe laughed because I passed some gas. I just can't, I've outgrown it. I can't with that anymore. And on their new album, for fuck's sakes, like the second song is called Aquatic Mouth Dance. Like whatever, like beat poetry you're trying to do, Anthony, you're doing it very badly. And I wish you would stop. I wish you'd go back to the Californication era where it seemed like the band took themselves seriously as artists. Now they're just, wow, we're goofy, you know. It's like I still give them a try every now and then, and I still will when they release a new album, but I just think I'm over them. I've outgrown them. All right, number 4, we got Insane Clown Posse. Yes, folks, there was a strange time in my life in my mid-20s. I just got out of a bad breakup. I was sober for like 8 months, and ICP just spoke to me, apparently. I went out and bought most of their albums. I felt the need to show you proof of my album buying. I even bought Shaggy 2 Dope's solo album, Fuck the Fuck Off, Motherfucker. I listened to them almost exclusively for like it was like 2016 or something, yeah, something like that. That was also the year I had a nervous breakdown, so that probably had a lot to do with it too. But just as quickly as I got into them, I got sick of them. The horror rap, the bad jokes, it just got stale to me quickly. I can still listen to them. I can still hear their tracks and not be like, oh, ICP, it's so cringe, blah, blah, blah. I was never one of those ICP haters. Like, I knew that there was probably songs in their repertoire that I would have liked if I gave them a chance. And I gave them a chance, and I did for a time really like some of their songs. I'm just over it now. Oh, number 3, we got old Slipknot. I think a lot of people have outgrown Slipknot at this point. They were definitely one of those edgy metal bands that your parents were afraid of, that you loved because your parents hated them. And, the thing about Slipknot, first two albums. That's what most Slipknot fans say. Their first 2 albums were really innovative. Never really saw anything like it. The music was heavy. Corey Taylor's voice was just so intense with the constant screaming, and the hooks were like catchy, but not in like a overly pop saccharine way. They were just like solid hooks. I do have to say as well, like, I love their visual aesthetic, and I still do. Like, I've always been into masks. I myself wanted to wear a mask when I started my first band, and we definitely experimented with the face paint thing when that didn't really do us that many favors, so we kind of cut that out. But always loved their masks, and since they've worn masks their whole career, they haven't aged a bit. But anyway, after their second album, things started going downhill for me. The Slipknot formula became very apparent, and it follows like this. A, Corey Taylor scream raps in the verses or just talks fast, and then sings the big hook for the chorus. B, the drums usually do this gallop beat in every song, like doom doom da doom 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 da doom 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 da ba doom doom da doom doom doom. And then C, the guitars are tuned to like drop B, and the riff usually sounds something like this. Hey, you get the point. Are you starting to sense a theme on this list for me yet? Basically, artists doing the same shit that starts out fresh and becomes stale, that's a big turnoff for me. Like, I'm not super into that, so try to mix it up, Like, most of my favorite bands, like, all of their albums sound completely different from each other. Smashing Pumpkins, Radiohead, Genesis, Rush, constantly innovating, constantly changing up their sound. R.E.M., that's another band. Slipknot did eventually start doing like acoustic shit and more dialed back stuff where Corey Taylor just kind of sang the entire song. But at that point, you really feel like you're just listening to Stone Sour, his side project band that was like big in the early 2000s. And I don't know. It just doesn't sound on brand for them. They've just dug their hole so deep that it's hard to kind of branch out.
I don't understand.
Number 2, I have outgrown Eminem, ladies and gentlemen. I was so into this dude when he first came out. His edginess was such a breath of fresh air in the late 90s, where you had these like preened and proper boy and girl bands and your Ricky Martins and your J-Lo's and like all these just all this pop music was so sugary, and Christina Aguilera, it was so sugary and overproduced and clearly fucking fake, and nobody my age, especially if you were a male, identified with any of it. You thought it was the cheesiest bullshit ever. And then Eminem comes out with like the real Slim Shady, and it was just like, yes, we have all been thinking this shit, and you were the one to say it, and it was great. But much like Slipknot, first 2 albums, man. First 2 albums. Slim Shady LP, Marshall Mathers LP. After that, I think along with a lot of other people I know, lost interest. The Eminem Show, though, was a huge earner for him and is probably his biggest record. It started getting a lot poppier. It started getting a lot more like, I mean, okay, you go from the Marshall Mathers LP, and that is just so raw and so like, there's no kind of pretentiousness to it. You're getting something that feels very real and very like guttural. But then the Eminem Show felt a little bit more manufactured, a little bit sillier. A lot of the anger had kind of dissipated into this like silliness. Oh, and then the album after that, Encore, that was just a complete dumpster fire. Even Eminem has said as much. So everything after Eminem show, there would be like 2 or 3 good songs on each of the albums, but literally everything was just garbage to me. Eminem's like chorus hooks have gotten so cheesy, and there's just too many examples to name, but like he is really into singing his chorus hooks now, and they don't sound right. They don't sound on brand for him. They don't sound like he's rapping like really like violently and saying all this like, fucked up shit in the verses, and then he's like singing this like pop chorus. It just, the two don't really go together, and he's been doing that like pretty much ever since like the Encore days. I feel like Eminem just feels like a throwback at this point to like, the time when he was like super relevant and raw and fresh. And all right, probably the biggest band that I've outgrown would be Blink-182. If I'm going to be honest, they just don't do it for me anymore. Especially their old stuff. It's so simplistic. There's nothing challenging about going back and listening to a Blink-182 record. There's nothing that's going to like, oh wow, I never heard that part, that guitar part, or that thing before. It's all like their songs are just basic like 3-chord power chord songs. Like I bought one of their books that showed you how to play their songs on guitar once, and like literally every song was just like 4 chords, but they'd be like different notes for whatever the song was. It's the simplicity is what got me into Blink-182, and the simplicity is what got me out of Blink-182. Neighborhoods is literally like the only album that I still go back to and listen to, because that was the album that when Tom rejoined the band after their long hiatus after their self-titled album in 2003 or 2004. Neighborhoods came out in 2011, and most people said, "Oh, it just sounds like Angels and Airwaves." It did not sound like Tommy was. It did not. It did not sound like Angels and Airwaves. Tom's voice had just literally changed, and I should make a whole video about that weird phenomenon. He went from sounding like a high-pitched, nasally Californian to whatever the fuck he sounds like now. His voice just changed, and that's why people make the comparison. But no, that album is very explorative, a lot of layers of synth and interesting guitar bits. Tom's songwriting was really good on that album. I feel like Mark had some good contributions on there as well. I feel like the less Mark sings, the better, because he's got a very talky, talk singing sounding voice, very vanilla. I feel like that's why Plus 44 never really got that successful, because Mark cannot carry a band as the lead vocalist alone. He's a great addition to Tom's weird nasally sounding voice, but when the two work together, I feel like that's the best. So basically their old stuff is too simple for my taste, and then you have Neighborhoods, and then you have the new stuff with Matt Skiba that just straight up sucks. They have like 1 million writers on every song now, instead of it just being the 3 guys writing all the songs. They have all these pop producers writing these songs that don't sound like they should be that hard to write to where you would need all these producers. They're using fucking auto-tune on their vocals now, and it's plain as day. Matt Skiba and Mark Hoppus' vocals don't sound different enough to me to where I can even distinguish which one's singing. And I mean, look, I don't dislike Blink-182. I definitely still like them. I'm just not listening to them anymore because I've outgrown them. My musical tastes have evolved. So anyway, those are the 7 bands that I have outgrown that I loved at one point in my life, and now not so much. What are some bands that you feel you've outgrown? I could have put the whole late 90s nu metal in there as a band, a collective genre itself, as something I've outgrown. Your Godsmacks and your Disturbs and all that, definitely outgrew that genre that as well, and I used to think it was sick, bro. But anyway, remember to like, subscribe, comment. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and or night. Until next time, talk to you later. Good night.